Excellent. Well, thank you all for coming here today. This is the second time that the foundation has come to us to kind of share some of the tips and tricks that we as faculty and students and researchers can use to form partnerships and tap in. So thank you very much. I'm not going to take up any of your time and instead turn it over to.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth. Okay, a minute. I'm switching. I'm Elizabeth Ocampo. I'm one of the directors of development for the Office of Foundation Relations at the OSU Foundation. And we just want to thank the Aspire Center for again inviting us to come and speak to you today. This is the second of two trainings, like we said, and materials from the first session are available on the OSU Foundation website. My colleague Emily and I are going to be here to present to you today. So I'm going to actually pass it off to Emily. She's going to introduce our work and our team just really quickly before we get into the meat of our topic.
Hi, hello, I'm Emily. As you can see, we are a mighty team of four, technically three. We're still waiting to fill this position. So if you know of anybody who loves grant writing at the big swing level, let us know. And then at the far your left, my right, Mr. Paul Dubois, he is currently out on leave. He'll be rejoining us in mid-July. So we have, of course, Elizabeth, who is right here, myself, and then our lovely colleague, Addie, who helps keep us functioning. We hand off a lot of stuff to her, and she will always be a great first person to reach out to if you have questions, and then she can direct them to us. So yes, so then on to what it is that we do. We are here to help you get funding specifically through private funders or sponsors. So that's going to be folks that are not public funding agencies. So what we can do in our office is we'll see who's out there that may align with what your work is and make sure they're a good fit. We can do outreach to them, build relationships. We do know some pretty well, and we know what it is they like to fund. And then maybe you just need a second pair of eyes to go over your proposal. We can help with adjust with the voice. Something that can be a bit of a gear switch is going from that scientific technical language to a more lay audience language. And then if you get awarded, yay, we can help send you reminders about when your report is due and getting that turned in. And of course, doing something like we're doing today with professional development.
All right. So I want very much to hold the mic, but I won't. Okay. So today our topic, we're going to hit 5 big areas. We're going to talk about the informal pathways to donors that are maybe a bit more mysterious, about the strategies around that, about what you can communicate to them that is most attractive about your research, how our team can help with that process. And then Emily and I have just come back from a conference where we spoke to private foundations. So we're going to give you an update on the state of things in this current moment and close with some advice about what the state of private foundations right now means for actions that you can take. So the first section here, these informal pathways, the purpose of these training sessions are generally to provide strategies for you to initiate and build relationships with private funders. We always have to start with this one first caveat, which is when you know one private foundation, you know one private foundation. They are all different. There's one rule that they all have to abide by, which is that they have to distribute 5% of their assets in a charitable manner every year. That's the only actual rule. All the other rules, they get to write for themselves. So that means that they're designing their own programs, they're changing their priorities whenever they like to. They get to decide all of it, which means that none of them are the same. And it would be a mistake to assume that if you know how one foundation operates, that you can map that on across them all. That said, for this presentation, we're going to be talking about some generalities across the sector that we see. And you should know that any one foundation could be an exception to what we're about to say. So you'll have to do your own digging to find out what the idiosyncrasies of those particular foundations you're working with are. There are 2 main pathways to funding with a private foundation. One is through an open call, like a request for proposals. And that was what we discussed in our previous session. And you can find those materials again on our website. The other one is by invitation. Invitation only proposals are a bit mysterious because it begs the question, how do I get an invitation? The pathway to that can be a lot of work, a big swing, if you will. But there are benefits to working towards foundation giving in this way. It might be worth the extra effort to you. One reason is because invitation-only relationships with funders can often be a bit more personal, less transactional, and then potentially more resilient. So if there are changes at their organizations or changes within your work, then maybe the relationship can overcome those sorts of changes, and they're not going to drop you or you drop them because you have built up this more personal relationship. And then also invitation-only grant makers right now in the United States are the funders that are giving away the largest grant awards. So if you're looking to break into that upper echelon of very large awards, invitation-only funders are kind of the way to do it. So how do you do it? The first thing is to be findable. Invitation-only funders are sourcing their own grantees. So they're looking for you. You have to be in a place where you can be findable. There are lots of options for you to put yourself out there for a funder to find you. The ones that you probably know best are the academic outlets, and those would be through like announcements of who's been funded by which agencies for what projects, or the scholarly publications that you do in journals. But these private foundations, the really rigorous ones are maybe looking at those academic outlets, and then you've got this other field that are maybe looking at things that are more messages that are more directed to the public at large. So we're thinking about traditional media, that would be newspapers, magazines, TV, radio, that sort of thing. Finding ways to put yourself in those places. Social media is an interesting space right now because there's a lot of fragmentation about where social media conversations are in the loss of Twitter. Twitter used to be the place where these conversations usually started. And now seems like the biggest movement in the private foundation sector is toward LinkedIn. The program officers are on LinkedIn now, and there are even some funding calls that are exclusively opened to followers on LinkedIn. So it's a good idea to put yourself there and to maybe even treat it like maybe you would have treated Twitter previously, where you're updating your social media group on LinkedIn about the activities of your lab, what you're working on, things that you're reading or you're excited about, so that you can be in touch with this media platform here. I know it's annoying to have to rebuild a social media presence on a new platform if you're not already on LinkedIn, but this really is kind of a place where this is starting to happen more and more. And then other new media places, podcasts, blogs, website, your website, as just a place to be more out there and findable by outside people. And then the final one, of course, is conferences. Foundations send their program officers to conferences to hear what's on the forefront of interest in your field, who's got the new ideas, where those conversations are happening. You don't need to even be presenting, you just have to be there, can run into somebody. We tell stories about how at our conferences, we might end up in an elevator with a program officer from HHMI, and then we can be like, hey, so what do you think? How can we advance somebody to this? To this grant program, and then they'll give you direct advice. So having an option to just run into people at conferences can be really valuable. Another one is engagement opportunities. Engagement opportunities is sort of advancement lingo for just finding ways to be in the same room and to have meaningful communications. And foundations oftentimes would love to come visit you in the place where you're doing your work so they can see it firsthand. That might mean that we invite them to campus so that they can meet you, they can hear what you're working on, they can see your lab, they can meet your students. Or if you're having events, hosted conferences, symposia, convenings, lectures, the things that you're already planning to do here on campus, making sure that you just invite foundations to come and attend too, so they can meet you in person and hear what you're doing and find out ways that they can maybe partner with you going forward. When we're talking about by invitation only foundations, they are exclusively using their networks to find funders. So the challenge is to find ways that your network overlaps with their network so that you can all bump into one another and you can be discovered by them. The ways that those networks can intersect would be other private foundations. They're all in the same club together. They chat all the time. They know that if maybe something doesn't fit for their own foundation, they know about another foundation that might be a better fit, and they can broker an introduction for you. They are also then really tied into their own grantees. A lot of those are direct service nonprofits. Those are organizations that rely on grants to operate, and so they have a lot of funder networks. But then also your peer researchers, or even the people above you, your mentors and advisors who've had long-standing relationships for longer. These are all places where your network can be advantageous to help with introductions to invitation-only funders. So what happens when they find you? What do you need to have prepared to go? Our best advice is to create a menu of possible projects that a funder could support for you, and to think about it in various brackets, either dollar brackets or time distances or both. You want to just make sure that you're ready to answer the question if somebody comes to you and they say, what would you do if I gave you $1 million? Or what would you like to achieve in 3 years? Just have answers to those questions on the spot, because if your answer is, I'm not sure, let me get back to you, that's not really the vote of confidence that you'd like to have when you're talking with these people, especially if it's an introduction. So having something like that can be really helpful. If you have questions about whether your menu is a good menu, or if you want some feedback on it, Emily and I are happy to be part of those conversations. And then I lost a slide. So there's one more slide, which is, actually, I think it's later. Never mind. Okay, so the next section is what is most attractive about your research. So if funders are out there looking for potential partners, what is it that they're looking for? I'm going to start with innovation. This is not a jargon word. What they're talking about is projects and research that are a jump ahead or a novel approach. It's not the next logical step in a long line of research. So to think about what about your research or your projects are special, unique, uses outside the box thinking, and the whole project doesn't need to be innovative. A specific element within your project could be. So that could be like the methodology or the research method, or maybe a piece of equipment or a beneficiary population that you're working with, something about it that makes it special. And that's the piece that you would elevate to a foundation. You should learn more about this project. It has this innovative aspect. Important feedback that we received from foundations just last week is that risk is still important to them. They want to fund innovation. They want to fund risk. They don't want people pivoting to proposals that are just sure thing projects. They want you to propose big ideas. We're in an uncertain time, so there has been a lot of movement from people to be safe. Doris Duke specifically told us that they don't want you to propose programs that stabilize or sustain existing systems, but they instead want you to boldly reimagine structures. And those are the kinds of proposals they're looking for. Innovation has always been important to foundations, and it's going to continue to be of importance to them. The other one is powerful collaborations. Collaborative funding, again, is important, but we're not talking about just regular collaborations. We're talking about things that take your proposal to the next level. An example was from Henry Luce Foundation, who told us this last week, that they are especially concerned about the existential separation between institutional research, higher ed, and people. So what they're looking for is research that's co-created and co-disseminated with beneficiaries from the ground up, where relationships between communities and institutions can foster new avenues of trust. So in this way, we've got two levels going. So the program has its own deliverables, but then we've got like meta deliverables where we're working on systems change that's helping to overcome this lack of trust in institutions that the public is seeing. So we've got collaborations that empower that next level of impact. Remarkable results. So funders are going to be looking for you to be able to say clearly, concisely, in a pithy way, what it is that you've already accomplished with your research, with your prior research, and what it is about that that sparks the interest to continue and to do more, and why all of that is important. It can be really challenging, I think, for people to take a body, a lifetime of work, and distill it to a sentence or two. And so this is not an easy thing to do, but it's really, really important to be able to find a way, and it needs to be clear and concise and layperson understandable, which again is challenging. And Emily and I are here to help with that kind of work. And then finally, and perhaps the most importantly, impact. Foundations are engines of social good. They are altruistic bodies primarily. So while as scientists here at the university, we might say that the understanding and the seeking of new scientific knowledge is meritorious in and of itself, we've got to think about foundations when we're talking about partnering with them. Their measure of importance is about society and the work of making society better and the world a better place. So when you talk to them, we have to think about it through the lens of what is the measurable benefit to society for your work. And measurable is important. So we're talking about it's evaluated. There's a way to discern in a measurable way what it is that is improved. So then they can compare your measurable benefit against other people who are also working in that space. And they can find somebody that matches their interests. And that's the second bullet there is also important. Impact for the project has to match their interest, their impact goals too. If it doesn't, that's where you get those rejection letters that are like, what you're doing is super admirable. We really applaud your work in this area. We think it's super important. It just doesn't match what we want to do. Sorry, which we see all the time. So finding that match is really important as well. So in summary, when you're talking to a funder, you're trying to attract their attention, you're looking to tell them what is innovative, what is powerfully collaborative, what's remarkable, and what's impactful to society. These 4 things are important. Now, say that you grab someone's attention, what then? Then we're talking about cultivating long-term relationships. This first one, you have to take the funder's lead about what kind of relationship they're looking for. This is just like an interpersonal relationship, right? Where you like are meeting a person and maybe they want to be friends, but maybe you're not sure. Maybe they're going to be wary about getting close to you. Some foundations want to be close. They want to be friends. They want to get personal. And in that case, maybe building a relationship with them looks like going out to coffee with them, sharing details about your personal life with them, sharing and celebrating in one another's victories. Others are looking to keep the relationship more distant to retain their objectivity. And so in that case, building a relationship with them might mean that you are just super reliable and responsive. And that would be the way to build trust and relationship over time. So we have to like feel them out. What are they looking for? The second here, conversations should be about how to collaborate, co-create, and build together. Foundations prefer to consider their role in your work as collaborative because you're really working together in their own way. They have an important part in this, that you're jointly solving some sort of societal ill together. They've got the pile of money, you've got the research together, you can do the good work. So that means it's really important to be humble, to be willing to listen, willing to build a project together, to see each other's perspectives in the building of a project. They would find it really annoying if you were to come in and be like, well, I'm always right because I have the academic expertise. That would be a way to separate yourself and to close off the relationship. And then the third one here, consider how the foundation might view your work as view the return on investment for you and your work. Foundations are nonprofits, but they're also businesses. They have organizational objectives, and the way that they choose to use their resources has layers of internal oversight and external scrutiny. So you have to demonstrate why it is you're a good investment from them, from a business sense. And that's just another different way to think about it. So you've got this personal relationship potentially that you're building with them, but also you have to see them as their business interests at the same time. All right, so next we're going to go to how OSU Foundation can help with all of this.
So we are your expert layperson. Like my background is in the theater arts, doing stage management and arts management. So I'm not going to be able to speak the same language as you, but I can help reinterpret the language and help tell a story. So when we are working with private funders, that's kind of our goal, is we're helping to tell the story of your work. And navigating logistics, determining, can it run through our office? Does it need to run through OSRA? Or is it going to be a subaward involved, indirect cost policy, all that stuff? So we can help with that. And then we want to empower you. We want you to, in like the different examples of relationships that Elizabeth just discussed, are you going to have that more personal relationship? Or do we have to kind of come in and help guide and steward because of just the nature of that organization? So we're here to kind of interpret what's happening and then ensure that you are getting across in that concise, collaborative, are you checking all those boxes? And yes, we want to just empower you all to be successful.
All right, so like I said, Emily and I just came from a conference, and we heard from a lot of program officers and presidents at several leading national funders about the state of the private foundation sector. And we thought we would share that with you because it was something of interest in our last session. And this material is all just pulled directly from their comments to us. The first thing is that they're going to double down on organizational mission. And for a lot of these foundations, organizational mission is diversity, equity, and inclusion. What we heard from Sloan Foundation is they view it as there's just so much work that is still allowed. There's not as much that is disallowed. They're just going to continue to work on their mission-centered work that is allowable by the government to do here in these public universities. And that the executive branch is not the arbiter of what the social sector chooses to do with its own money. And so they're going to just fight back on that. Some specific comments, Doris Duke said that they're navigating concerns, internal concerns about sending misleading messages to policymakers about whether philanthropy can or even should pick up the tab on all of this work that is now being defunded. They don't want to inadvertently demonstrate the merits of privatization. They also said that they're not going to provide any relief, aka emergency funding, because they're instead focusing on rebuilding and responding. That's the way that they're going to approach this, because they believe that's more in line with their organizational mission. William T. Grant Foundation has concerns about adopting a whack-a-mole strategy to various changing news pieces. So they're going to sit it out and wait for a little bit longer to see where things land. Henry Luce Foundation has concerns about being able to meet the needs of future crises if they expend all their resource on this crisis. So that's one of the reasons they've decided to continue mostly as they have been before with their focus on their mission. And then Sloan says that there's a lot of dust that still needs to settle, and that's how they're choosing to respond. More to that, though, they understand that in this time, there is need for more flexibility. They're not going to be as rigorous about responding to every question in exactly the way that their rubric says it has to be. If there's a question in a proposal that says, tell us about your diversity, equity, and inclusion goals, and tell us the university's, pledged whatever, and that's a problem for you and your institution, they're gonna be flexible and be like, we understand that this is a problem for you. You tell us what you can tell us, we'll hear you, and we'll work with you. Other foundations are making big changes in the way that they are requiring reporting from their grantees. Generally, there's just less reporting burden and there's more trust because they know there's maybe the body of vocabulary that was available to you to talk about your work and what it means is limited right now. And so they want to make sure that they're responding to that moment by being available to you in this time. Biggest takeaway, we asked every single foundation we talked to, will you just give us more money, please? And they said no. Instead, their plans are maybe to tweak the models. So changing grant size or the number of grantees, although it was interesting that we got very conflicting messages. Some people took this to mean we're going to do more grants that are smaller, and other people said we're going to do smaller, or we're going to do fewer grants that are larger. So it really all depends. Some of them are deciding on emergency funding to sort of fill in some gaps for things that have been lost. Almost everybody is redistributing the allocated money they had already planned for this year to different programs based on what they're seeing out there. Except there are exceptions, of course. So Gates Foundation news that you probably heard is going to spend down its $200 billion endowment over the next 20 years. They have 4 program areas that they're interested in. They're going to spend it all down. The plan right now is to spend it all down in just those 4 program areas. So while everyone would really, really like Gates to give them money for their project, it has to be a good fit for their mission and for their priorities. But there's going to be a huge amount that comes out of that. Marguerite Casey Foundation is an interesting one. We were in a session where we asked the question, would you please give away more money? And she said, we usually give $25 million away a year, but this year we've decided to give away $135 million. And the whole room broke out into applause. We were very excited. But she said the reason for that was because the mission of this foundation is to support and protect democracy. And they felt that this mission, that this moment was a direct connection to their mission. And so it made a lot of sense for them to make big investments outside of their regular endowment distributions. And the last one I'll just point out is Simons Foundation, which has been giving away 8%, more than the required 5% for years now, and is just going to continue to do that. So they're already giving away more. They're going to keep up with that. They're not pulling back, even in the sight of this uncertainty. Additionally, they're all preparing for the possible loss of their 501c3 status as a retaliatory activity and or the introduction of an endowment tax. I thought was encouraging that they are not planning to change what they do. They might just have a little bit less to give away because they have to do this other stuff to pay for these other things instead. But in the meantime, they are committed to their missions. And if it means that their organizations change structure, that would be fine. Henry Luce was hilarious, though. They were like, listen, if the government decides to take away our 501c3 status, they'll probably feel bad about that in the end, because then we'll be released from all these regulations that tell us what we can't do. And we'll just start doing all of that. And they'll be sorry, is basically what he said. It was fun. There's lots more cross-organization collaboration. These foundations have started meeting together, big groups of them over the last 6 months to develop strategies that they can partner on together. They're pooling their resources. They're co-administering RFPs and other sorts of grant funding pipelines. This is a big trend right now where a single foundation is maybe not as interested in going out on a limb on an idea, but if they collaborate together with a group of 3, 4, 5 other foundations, then there's more security for them in making big decisions and big investments in societal problems. An example, a recent one, the Spencer Foundation Rapid Response Bridge Funding Program This is a collaboration with Kapoor, William T. Grant Foundation, and Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. Screenshot of it here. This is for people who have lost their NSF funding that are STEM education researchers. And the grants are for $25,000. Deadlines May 30th and June 13th if you want to apply. But part of the eligibility requirements is that you have to upload your grant has been canceled document into the portal, and that is part of it. Most importantly, I think for this room, when we talk about this, is there's just going to be lots more competition because there's a lot of movement from people from federal grants into private grants. William T. Grant Foundation just this month held a webinar that usually sees about 200 attendees, and they had 2,000 attendees for this webinar, and they had 4 times the number of applicants to their most recent RFP. Prior to this year, this was already a competitive program with just a 4 to 5% success rating, and that number will probably go down dramatically. So what do we do about all that? Most important of all, I think, to remember is that funder priority fit and mission fit are more important than ever before. There's just so much out there and there's so much need that it's not worth your time. It's not worth their time to try and force those proposals where you're like, it's kind of a fit. It's mostly okay. We'll just see if it slides through. Don't do that. Just make sure that you're matching exactly with a foundation, because there's enough competition that you'll just be eliminated, disqualified if it's not a great fit. We asked the funders specifically, what do we tell us people in these positions? What do we tell you? What advice should we give you? Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, Adam Falk said, read the funding announcement, read the funding announcement. And then once again, read the funding announcement. This is very helpful advice. There's just not enough philanthropic funding to fill the gap that's left by federal research funding loss. In 2023, universities received $60 billion in federal research funding from federal agencies. And in that year, private foundations had a huge increase in the amount that they gave. Their funding went up 13%, but still even then was less than 10% of the total amount that the feds gave. There is not enough capital to do it all. Understanding that, philanthropy continues to operate from a vantage point of filling gaps where government doesn't operate. And we have a lot of new gaps in government right now, but the philanthropic sector has 3 areas that they have always said are big gaps that are the job of philanthropy to work on. One is high-risk research and untested innovation. There's not an appetite for that in government. Partnerships that collaborate across societal silos are uncommon in the public sector still. And then finally, research that invests in the societal benefits of inclusivity, equity, and diversity are currently under siege. Those are 3 things that we're going to continue to be super important to philanthropic organizations. So then we said, all right, well, what do we tell you all in this room right now, in this moment, when you're losing federal funding and there's not enough private funding? What are you supposed to do? And we heard from Doris Duke and Simons Foundation this same sentiment, which I thought was good, and Sloan from this, which was they'd like you to ask us, they'd be asking you all to consider the potential whiteboard moment we'll have in 3 years' time, and take action now to prepare for the moment when we have to rebuild everything that has been dismantled. No one in this room probably thinks that if we rebuild the systems that they should be exactly the same as they are now. We all understand that those are flawed. So if we can start from a relatively clean slate, what is it that we would all like it to look like to start working on that now? Which is, I thought was a nice, hopeful moment to share, but then it doesn't actually help you right now. So in summary, then, if we're going to think about unorthodox ways or informal ways to approach private foundations, I'd love you to think more about being findable, being out there, putting actual time and energy into making yourself visible in a public space. hone your message to what about your work is innovative, collaborative, remarkable, and impactful to society, reach out to us to help you with this. You can lean on our expertise. We're here to help. And then to really keep the funder's mission front and center. And finally, of course, to read the funding announcement. Our website is available through this QR code. It's also up there. If you want to talk to us, Addie Hall, our coordinator, is a great first point of contact. We would love to talk to you about your research and answer questions for you. And we have time now for questions with you all. Yes, go ahead.
So I.
Oh, sorry.
Oh. So the idea of like making. Make sure it's on. Oh, I can do that. Perfect. So many things. My name is Dave Dallas. So the idea of like making yourself more findable, I get that part. The part that I'm not clear on yet is how to make yourself more findable by like specifically the people that are like those foundation folks. So like, do you have like tips for like how to do that specifically, or like, like I know how to find like the request for proposals and stuff for like current foundations, but I don't know how to find the ones that are like these kind of like invitation only kind of things. So like, I don't know, is there like a good way to do that? Or is there like a list of these agencies that would be like good fits for like the kind of research we do in our college? Or I have no idea.
Yeah. I'm gonna just share my bias with you right now, that invitation only structures are by design not very democratic. And it makes it so that you have to know somebody who knows somebody, basically, to get an invitation to this, which is perpetuating systems of bias, unfortunately, also. So we've got a lot of barriers to break through to get to this, especially at Oregon State University. If you're placed at an institution like Yale or UCLA, then you have more on-ramps to these places because they already know that institution, and they have developed relationships with those places already. Here at OSU, we have a bit of a disadvantage because we also need to educate these potential partners about why OSU is fantastic and why great work happens here. What I'll say is that I find that invitation-only funders, they like the hunt. They like finding their grantees. They like being the ones who discover the thing that they're going to be funding. And so that whole process is part of the fun to them. And so it is really just about making sure that you're not missable. There's a lot of opportunity for them to run into your research and the stuff that you're doing in the public sector, so that you're just out there all the time. How could they not know you? And then also, when you have a contact in your network that has specific connections with the foundation that you want to talk to, really utilizing those connections, not being too shy to be like, I need an invitation to so-and-so. Can you make that happen for me? Because that's how this all works. It's all about who knows who. And there are some opportunities for our institution, for our office, to invite new conversations. We just had this recently with Heising Simons Foundation, where we invited them to campus because they had heard somewhere that we had a pretty good oceanography program. I'm not sure where they heard that. They were like, we haven't really noticed for a long time, but somebody told us that maybe we should come talk to you. And we put together this giant campus visit where we put a bunch of people in front of them that we thought they should know. And by the end of the visit, they said, gosh, we really have been missing out all this time. And we wish that we had known more about what you were doing here, because this is so perfect. And we're really impressed. And that's just the way that invitation-only funding can sometimes operate, where there are blind spots. So that means being like maybe a bit obnoxious with how much you're out there and in these different spaces, making sure that you're not just really well represented in one space, but you're covering a lot of bases with the way that you're talking about yourself and your research. Does that, I mean, it's not, yeah.
I-
Anything more?
Well, as we talked about earlier, I know some folks kind of came in later. One of the suggestions we have is LinkedIn. So maybe start thinking about your being in your influencer era. So if you want to, a pithy catch line, hashtags, resharing press releases. I used to do marketing and communications for nonprofits in Eugene. And so I was on social media platforms. So working with your office here, out of the College of Health, because David, you work with you've worked with Paul on a number of grants. So we're I know of your work. And so I think, if you do hashtag lactation or, something to that effect that could grab attention. But that's, we also have to think about the algorithms. So if you are going to be on LinkedIn, they use an algorithm. And so you have to kind of play to that too. So your homework assignment is to start practicing your kind of persona, how you're going to present yourself. If you're an introvert, I can imagine there's a few here in the room. What's going to be your, I was told I was the designated extrovert at the conference, but when she knows the right people, she is very extroverted. So it just depends. But think about how you can talk about, if you ran into somebody at the grocery store. Just even with my travels, talking to a Lyft driver or a cab driver. Oh, why are you here? How can you talk about your work to somebody? Like I explained to one of the cab drivers that the AI came up a lot and he and I connected really quickly and kind of had a shared belief. So that's kind of where you're going to need to be. And if you have something that's going to be splashy, if you can get a really good picture, is your lab website up to date? Does it have the most current contact information? Really, and if you need to pull in some Gen Z, pull in that, younger millennial that's in your classes, and say, hey, can you take a look at this? What is it missing? If we don't have stock photos, Unsplash is a really great website to get free, royalty-free images. So if you want to then have something that's clickable. So just like you would with Instagram, TikTok, you want to be thumb stopping. So as you're talking about yourself, you want to promote the good work you're doing, all that stuff. So that's just kind of putting on the marketer hat.
Right.
We have a question back here. Hello. Oh, yeah.
For those of us who need help with this, is that something that our colleges provide or that foundation provides?
So,
Oh,
yeah.
So
So,
you're my Gen Z connection though. So you.
so no, the mic.
Oh, okay. Hello. Is this good? Are we good?
Mhm.
All right. So, everything that you're saying and that Dr. Kyle asked, 110%. However, thank you for the compliment, but I think there's also a disconnect for me in a way. So like I had a really great, Huberman Labs, liked one of my posts on Instagram, which is huge. A lot of people don't understand that. I was like up here for a week. However, there's a disconnect because I do not know how to make that work for me. And so once that happened, you should be able to capitalize on that. I know that. I know that there's something that is missing there. So my question was going to be like Dr. Kyle asked, is there some way that you guys help with that? Is there a workshop that you're going to present about that or,
So the first
Thank
answer is no. That's a good question. The answer is no, that was not a plan, but it's a good idea that we should be thinking about. Yes. Okay.
Also in the Aspire Center, but I also direct the center here, the Hallie Ford Center. But Sidel, are you here? We just came up with this crazy idea for Sidel to do a social media workshop. Actually,
Awesome.
because we don't know. And I said, Sidel, help us. And so you're doing this, and we just came up with the date. And you guys, it's June 6th at 12, and there is food also, a similar deal to this. So again, just trying to be very workshoppy and saying, like, for people like me who would rather just hire a student to do this for me, sorry, like tell me how to do it. But Yes, so yes, come to that.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I think that it really does rely on our, relying on our expertise. So Emily and our expertise is in the minutia of grants, which is, I mean, Emily comes to this with a bit of experience outside of that too, but we have whole teams of people here at the university and at the foundation for whom marketing and social media is their expertise. And so finding opportunities where we can lean on them and get our questions answered, I think is really going to be the way forward because this is new terrain for all of us. And I know that sometimes I have Googled, what do I do about social media, and come up with a couple. We're like, oh, we can try this. But there has to be a more robust way to go about this. And I'm glad that you guys are doing the social media workshop. That's perfect.
That's a kind of different platform. So your LinkedIn platform and your socials, even though they're very different. So the way that you present yourself, on one is very different than the way that you'll present yourself on another one. So is there office that helps with like link? Because that's professional and it's a very specific presentation. So.
Ah, awesome. Yes. Yeah. So
But we did have someone from our college who want to come and tell us how to do that, but.
Sounds like there's a demand. We'll meet the demand.
Let me just, because there is a Zoom question
Uh-huh.
related to LinkedIn. So they said, for visibility, do you recommend having a department unit LinkedIn account, or is it best for individual PIs to use LinkedIn to share their science?
So I would, all of the above is probably the right answer, but more than that, I think that just having a space where there's engagement, so having a page where nothing happens is not great. So if there's a unit or a department page that never really gets updated, that's sending a bad message. You don't want that. Having it is not enough. It's having something that moves and is active and sharing stuff. So if you have the bandwidth for individual PIs to maintain and update their individual pages, then do that. But if it's something where there is bandwidth to maintain an active LinkedIn page from a department or a unit, then I think that's great.
And then they just added, by the way, we have access to Adobe stock photos through OSU Creative Cloud
Yep,
licenses.
that's true. Mhm. Awesome. Very good.
Well, it's hard to schedule this one.
I
we
know,
just
that's why
came
I'm
up
kind
with social media. We haven't.
In the last month of the quarter, so.
There's like no more space available.
So
Something to on ramp now because they are in these funding crises. I know a lot of people have.
I don't really need it right now.
So we can actually, if you're interested in Molly Kyle, can you up and then we'll organize something as well for a group.
Any
did
other
you have
questions?
a comment?
Did you have it?
When, just to, Dave, what you were talking about. Anyway, when we were, so I was just wondering if, what I've noticed in the time that we've gotten funding from various sources is, the clear and consistent messaging, right? So you kind of stay the course in what you do, and then you try to obviously establish your track record and your scholarly work, but then you also reach across and, be involved in things that are quite translational and different in industry areas or in other kinds of areas. And I think that then leads to like being asked to be on things. And then that led to being interviewed for something. And then that led to, so it's all that kind of stuff you're talking about. But I do think the messaging helps. I mean, our relationship with Gates Foundation has taken quite a long time to develop, and many presentations. And then it's been a weird thing, honestly. I'm sure maybe other people have a more clear cut way, but it took a while to make that.
Well, and that's the
go.
thing, is that a lot of these relationships, they start small and tentative. They're not going to come at you out of the gates and be like, we love everything you do. Here's this very large stack of money. It's usually like, let's start a conversation. And We're considering a new initiative. We'd love to have your feedback on your thoughts about this initiative. And then you have a conversation about a thing that they might end up doing eventually. And then they bring you in to be like, we'd love to have you maybe review some of the stuff that we've been receiving from our current grantees, because we really value your opinion and we think you might be a mover and a shaker here, and we think we want to draw you closer to us. It's usually a very gradual ramp up, but it is a lot of work, which is why I said this is a big swing. It takes commitment. It's not like just responding to an RFP where you're in and out in a year. So it is it's a different, but the benefits, like I said, can be really great, because once you're in the club, there's an opportunity for the sort of transformational funding, the very large grants that make it possible to, take the big steps that you'd like to make. But it's not something to take on lightly, that's for sure. And your experience with Gates is similar to many people's experience with Gates. Yeah. Nope.
If not, it seems like we're gonna plug the social media with Sidel. On June 6th. Anything else? I'm there, same place.
I'll just start with like a, basics of LinkedIn right now is make sure you have a page that has your name and your title and your institution in it, and then just start finding the program officers who are related to foundations that are of interest to you and start following them. So you're building up your network inside LinkedIn within foundation people. And that might be a good first step before you, really build out a great page. Yeah.
Hi, I'm with the College of Engineering.
Huh?
So I usually get foundation solicitations directly from our budget or whatever, pre-awards. So they do a good job. And I also try to apply a few before, but it's usually just me involving them with all the budget and propose everything. So I'm just curious, should I also involve you, or what is do we get a triangle going here?
Did not pay this person to ask this question. Okay, what is important to think about is that Emily and I are here for the words part of your proposal. Your pre-awards staff, if they have people on in your units that are helping you with budgets, they're great at budgets and numbers and the sorts of contractual obligation pieces of it. And we would never try to do that. We work with those people to make sure that you're on the straight and narrow for all of those pieces. But they're not going to have necessarily the tone or the vocabulary that you're supposed to be using when you speak to each of these foundations and their specific interests and audiences. So we can help you just take what you want to say and pivot it to the right tone and content that's going to be the most responsive to by these funders. So yes, please come talk to us. We're here to help you with the words part. So, and that's for any private foundation funder. I know engineering does a lot with corporations, and I'll tell you that the OSU Foundation just brought on a new corporate relations person. Her name is Marla. She's amazing. So there's going to be more resources around corporate support in the near term also. I'm so glad that you're reading those RFP newsletters. Please, everyone, read the RFP newsletter. Emily creates it. It's a work of love every single time. Anybody else? Questions?
There is one more on Zoom. I'm not sure that we have time, but maybe they,
But
can
yeah.
also email you. It says, "I'm branding ourselves to be attractive to foundations using social media or other. How do we balance keeping a neutral image that would also allow us to work alongside our federal partners?"
Yeah. So, so when you're talking about partnering with a foundation, you're talking about aligning yourself with a partner to achieve the same social good goals. So hopefully nothing about that is problematic, but you always have to consider who those partners are going to be. Maybe they're led by an individual that you don't necessarily want to put on your CV. That's something to consider when you're thinking about that. And in this current climate where there's challenges around maybe setting yourself up to be in line for retaliatory action from a federal agency based on what you're submitting to a private foundation, again, the private foundations are really interested in working with you so that you're not in that situation. If it's going to be an issue, they want to work with you to make sure that what you're submitting and what you're working on is not going to put you in a place of harm. And that's a conversation that you can reach out to those foundation program officers and work with them on how you can modify what you submit so that you are safe and secure in your position here and with your other grant funding. Does that help? Okay, cool. Thank you all so much for us. We have information you are hoping to take with you. If you would like to have a picture with you, and we'd love to have more. Thank you.